Howdy again, everybody. This is Doc with Thoroughfan, and it is finally here. We are here, Breeders' Cup week. I just got in with my parents to Lexington, staying in this wonderful guest house about 10 minutes or so from the track. Looking forward to getting to the track tomorrow morning, seeing some of the horses in the morning, and of course taking part in a lot of the festivities and all of the events that are going to be going on during Breeders' Cup week, culminating, of course, with the cards on Friday and Saturday. Post positions were just drawn today. Looks like we've got some amazing racing ahead of us, and a lot of things go into making the Breeders' Cup what it is and the wonderful event that is put on every year. And of course, at the foremost of a lot of people's minds always are the safety of the horses and the jockeys, everybody participating. So there's a lot that goes into that aspect of things too. And it's a little bit interesting this year as we've kind of got a mixture of different groups and organizations that are going to be responsible for a lot of the rules and protocols and safety and all of that stuff involving the horses and the jockeys and all the participants basically with the Breeders' Cup. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that and see exactly what is being done to ensure the integrity and safety of the event as we go ahead and discuss Breeders' Cup's rules, integrity, and safety protocols. Alright, so as I said, this is as best as I can determine from looking at the different types of rules that are going to be in effect for the Breeders' Cup horses and the Breeders' Cup races. Because again, you're kind of dealing here a little bit with two different entities. And the first of which, of course, is HISA, the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority. And they have control now, based on the fact that rules went into place back in the summer, of everything regarding the safety of the horses. Now, they don't have any authority yet over out-of-competition testing or drug testing or anything of that nature. That, of course, does not go into effect until the first of the year, 2023. So there's a little bit of a split here, and we'll talk about that, but basically they are in charge of overseeing and basically doling out any penalties, ensuring the safety of all of the racehorses and the jockeys that are participating, making sure the track is safe. All of those things now fall under the authority of HISA. The drug testing, which we'll talk about in a little bit, still falls under the regulation basically of the Kentucky Horse Racing Authority, Kentucky Horse Racing Commission, and of course with help from the Breeders' Cup on that, as Breeders' Cup has some of their own rules thrown in there as well. So what are some of the most basic rules that we have to look at when it comes to the horses participating in the Breeders' Cup? The first of which is basically every horse that is going to be competing in a Breeders' Cup race has to be on the Keeneland grounds, so the Keeneland backstretch, by November 1st, which this is being filmed on Halloween night, October 31st, so basically by tomorrow, Tuesday, November 1st, all of the horses have to be on the grounds. At that time, they will basically be put under 24-hour security surveillance, which means that there's going to be somebody monitoring them for 24 hours. There's going to be what we call security logs, of logging anybody who goes in or out to look at the horse, take care of the horse, potentially treat the horse with anything if it's needed. Anything involving somebody laying hands on or going into the stall of that horse should hopefully be logged in by the security personnel so that everybody can check. In addition now, the veterinarians, and there's a bunch of extra veterinarians that are brought in specifically for the Breeders' Cup, will be monitoring these horses daily. One thing that we found out, which was interesting from watching FanDuel TV and their morning's work show, was that every horse that is going to be competing in the Breeders' Cup, even before they go out in training, are going to be required each day to jog for the veterinarian. And this is something that's done to hopefully pick up any maybe subtle lamenesses, subtle intricacies with horse's gait per se, that may need to be examined further or at least noted by the veterinarian before they go out and train. And this is something that hopefully will catch any minor injuries before they could potentially become major injuries. And if this were to happen, obviously the veterinarian would talk with the trainer and a decision would have to be made whether to go ahead and scratch that horse from the race or see if more diagnostics were needed, if more information needed to be gathered, things of that nature. I can almost guarantee you that with an event as big as the Breeders' Cup, if there's any possible doubt about the soundness of a horse, they are going to scratch that horse out of abundance of caution and in the best interest of the safety of the horse. In addition, veterinarians are going to be positioned on the track itself during morning workouts and training to observe these animals, horses, as they are galloping, as potentially they are breezing or working, or even just jogging around the track, looking for, again, any subtle signs of potential illness or injury, and of course flagging those horses for further examination as the day goes on and the week goes on, getting closer to the Breeders' Cup races themselves. Same thing. If they notice anything, there's going to be further examination of that horse. Every horse is going to also undergo a thorough physical examination, looking at their limbs, flexing their joints, making sure there's no sign of swelling or inflammation anywhere that might be a tip-off of a problem. And this is probably going to happen multiple times throughout the week as the veterinarians look at these horses. And of course, if there is a horse that potentially piques a little more interest from the veterinarians on the grounds of maybe wanting to examine an area a little bit more, they are going to, of course, undergo more scrutiny. So this all leads up to the horses on race day, when they, of course, are going to be examined again the morning of their race day. They are going to be put through the same type of jogging exam to make sure there's no sign of lameness. They are going to be palpated up and down to make sure there's no sign of problems with their joints or their tendons or anything like that. The veterinarians are going to basically do everything they possibly can to ensure that that horse is sound and safe to go out and run the races that day. There's going to be veterinarians in the paddock on race day examining the horses as they come over and as they're saddled. There's going to be veterinarians on the racetrack looking at them as they warm up, and especially as they go into the gate to see if there's any problems with them warming up. There's going to be veterinarians following the horses around as they race. And so if, God forbid, there is an injury or anything like that, the veterinarians can get to that horse to administer treatment as fast as is humanly possible. And of course, there's going to be veterinarians that are going to be watching the horses after their race as they come back to be unsaddled and as they're cooling out and walking back to their barns. Again, noting any possible sign of lameness and flagging those horses to be looked at more thoroughly, either back in the test barn or in their own barns, depending on what's going on. So these horses are going to be examined up and down, left and right, inside and outside, anything you could possibly think of, to make sure, again, that they are as safe as they can possibly be. And these veterinarians are being brought in. They are experts in this area. They have a lot of experience in this area, so they bring in the best and the brightest for the Breeders' Cup to make sure that these horses are as sound as they can possibly be as far as that goes. So that's kind of what's going to be happening, in a very general way with the horses as far as being examined for safety. The jockeys also are going to have to make sure that they are registered with the jockey concussion database. I believe that's what it's called. It has a couple of different names, but they are at least going to be required to have that minimum baseline exam done for any signs of concussion injury or anything like that on file. And this way, if something, God forbid, again, were to happen, a jockey might suffer an injury or a head injury, they have something to go off of. So that is, of course, going to be required of the jockeys. And the jockeys, if anything comes up, there is medical teams on the ground to be able to help with the jockeys as well. So that's kind of where the jockey part of the health and safety comes in. Next, we kind of look at, well, what about the track surface itself? And again, this is something that now falls under HISA, and the tracks have to be able to comply with the rules that HISA is setting out for track safety. And again, they are bringing in the experts. Mick Peterson and his group coming in to examine the dirt surface. They have some real experts coming in looking at the turf surfaces as well. These surfaces are examined on a daily basis to make sure that they are even, they are consistent, there's no divots, there's no kind of undulations in the course, that the ground is safe, the going on the turf is good, and of course they will be monitoring this all week leading up to the Breeders' Cup races themselves and making any adjustments that kind of need to be necessary there. So all of this stuff is going to be monitored and logged. And again, you have the experts coming in to offer any kind of assistance if need be for those types of situations. So it's really important to see that as well. There's going to be other things looked at as far as the safety of the rails. If a horse happens to try to go into a rail or something like that, making sure the rails are as safe as they can possibly be for the horses and the jockeys. Having other safety protocols in place, equine ambulances, things of that nature. All those safety protocols now fall under what HISA wants to be done. And of course, you can find all of these safety protocols that are now basically the law of the land if you go to the HISA website. You can just search under the safety protocols. Those are the ones, as I said, that are now in place and basically the law of the land. So that's kind of a brief look at the safety side of things and what's going to be looked at. Now, when you look at the drug testing, again, now this falls under kind of the rules that Breeders' Cup has set up along with the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission and stuff, because they would kind of be the ones that are in the enforcement arm of this right now, since HISA's drug protocols and out-of-competition testing, all that stuff, does not officially take effect until January 1st of 2023. So Breeders' Cup really kind of goes above and beyond a little bit on this, and what they do actually is they start identifying horses way back in June that potentially have won win-in-your in races, or that look like they're going to be pointed to or have a likelihood of running in the Breeders' Cup races. And they will start out-of-competition testing on these horses. So that usually involves taking hair samples, taking blood samples, taking urine samples from these horses at random times. And these horses, you know, the owners, I should say, or the trainers of these horses have to present these horses for that testing when these authorities show up to do the testing. You can't kind of delay it or anything like that. So if it's in the US, it usually involves just going to the racetracks where these horses are stabled. If it's over in Europe, because we do have a lot of horses coming from Europe or other countries, they will travel to those countries and they will go to where those horses are training, and they will pull those out of competition testing samples again. And the big things they're looking for again are kind of the performance-enhancing drugs, the EPOs, any kind of blood builders, anabolic steroids, muscle builders, things of that nature that really give the horse a competitive advantage that are a lot of times are used in the training phase of things, but they're not actually used close to race time. So you wouldn't pick them up in post-race samples because, as a lot of people know, a lot of the real cheating and the doping and things like that, it's done in the training portion of things. It's not done right around the race. It's done in the training aspect. So that's why out-of-competition testing is so important in every sport, basically, not just racing, but especially in racing. Then, of course, as you get closer to the race, when, as I said, all the horses that have to be on the grounds by November 1st, at that time when they register and come on November 1st, blood, hair, and or urine samples are taken from them at that time too for out-of-competition testing. So those samples are taken and will be run. Of course, these tests are expedited, so any substances that may be found in the horse or something like that, hopefully would be found, notified, and verified before the horse is allowed to run. So if they were to be found positive for a substance, they ideally would be scratched before the running of the race. On race day, any horses that finish in the top 4 positions, as well as any other horses that the stewards may deem necessary, will be sent to what's known as the test barn, and there they will have post-race samples taken, usually of blood and or urine, to look for a myriad of substances that they could possibly be given either for doping purposes or even some medications that are out there that we do use in veterinary medicine that are allowed up to a certain point before the race, but are not allowed actually on race day or for a certain time frame. You know, we're talking 14, 21 days now for some of these non-steroidal injections on race day or in that period up to race day itself. So all of these are tested for, and if any are found positive, obviously the wheels of justice will crank as slowly as they often do when it comes to these types of cases, and proper sanctions will be meted out once all the hearing processes have gone on. So Breeders' Cup has also instituted a little bit more of a further withdrawal period for certain things like non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. You cannot, what we call stack, so you can't use multiple non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs in a horse at all. And if there's any evidence of those drugs being found either at all or at a specific threshold, and it depends on what that threshold is, that horse will be disqualified from racing, or so hopefully would happen. That horse would be disqualified from racing. Of course, the big thing as far as drugging or drugs used, I shouldn't say drugging, drugs used, is Lasix. And as has been the case for a couple of years now, no Lasix is allowed in any of the Breeders' Cup races. So no horse is allowed to be treated with Lasix on race day. And of course, that's always created a little bit of a debate in the racing world, whether that's the best thing or not. But right now, that's what the rules are. So that's kind of where we stand when it comes to those types of things. Final kind of thing I'm going to talk about with rules, which is interesting, and again, where things kind of diverge a little bit, is when it comes to any potential interference that happens in a race. So if an inquiry or an objection is lodged, if there's interference in the running of a race, that does not fall under HISA. I think a lot of people are a little confused on that. I was initially too. HISA has no authority, even when everything is finalized, of being able to discipline jockeys that commit fouls via interference. That is still left up to the individual racing commission. So basically, what's going to be looked at is what's known as Category 2 rules, which are the stewards, if there is an objection or an inquiry, something happens in the running of a race, they're supposed to basically look at it to see, one, if a foul occurred, and two, if the foul that occurred affected the horse that was fouled from achieving a better placing. And if they feel that they were affected a better placing, they in theory should disqualify the horse that committed the foul. Of course, if anybody who follows racing knows that's not always the way sometimes the stewards see it, as compared to the way we fans see it, but that's the way the rules are written currently as far as interference and any kind of stuff like that going on in the race. Now, when it comes to the whip or the crop use, that does fall under HISA and their safety regulations. And that is an area that went into effect right around the middle of the summer, July 1st, and has created a lot of controversy as well, because HISA, I should say, does limit the number of strikes that a jockey can give a horse with the crop. In most cases, it's 6. That seems to be the number that's allowed. If a jockey goes over that 6-strike limit, then depending on how many strikes over they go, it depends on the level of the penalty that the jockey will get. Usually if it's only a couple of strikes over, the jockey will forfeit part of the purse, suffer potentially a couple of days of suspension, or be given a fine. Where it gets very interesting now is if they go to a certain level, to the 3rd level, which is usually about 4 or 5 strikes over the limit, not only does the jockey lose that portion of the purse that he would get, but the horse is disqualified and basically placed last, and the owner loses out on the purse money. This has become a huge area of debate right now in the racing world as to should the owners be penalized like that for something that the jockeys do. And the theory behind it was that if you use a jockey that constantly goes over the limit, hopefully an owner wouldn't do that. The other reason it was because there were some rumors out there that basically owners were saying, you go ahead, go over the strike limit. If that's what you need to do to get the horse to win, I'll pay your fine. Because before it used to basically just be a fine for going over the strike limit. The theory when HISA implemented this rule was that it would dissuade owners from giving jockeys that rule or that guidance saying, I don't care if you go over the strike limit, I'll just pay the fine or whatever. At least that's kind of the rumor that was going around. So it's going to be very interesting to see because some of the jockeys and trainers and owners say that, the crop is needed to get a horse to give its best effort. The other side of the coin is, it's that people saying, no, it's not. And now you've got right in the middle, what's going to happen with really the first time that this is looked at on a big international stage with huge purses. So, if one jockey goes way over the limit on something, that could be potentially a lot of money that both the jockey and the owner are losing. It can be very interesting to see if any of that plays out at the Breeders' Cup. So that kind of covers, hopefully, in a nutshell, some of the very basic safety protocols that are out there. Of course, everybody wants safe and fair racing. We don't want to see any injuries. We don't want to see any fatalities, definitely. We want to see a good, clean day of racing where all the horses and the jockeys come back safe and the best horses win. That's really what racing in the Breeders' Cup is all about. We are all really looking forward to it. I am super psyched to be able to be going to Keeneland this year. The card looks amazing. Some of these races are really going to be great. So hope everybody is able to potentially go and enjoy the Breeders' Cup in person. If you can't, hopefully you have tons of fun watching it on TV. You have some Breeders' Cup parties going on, and we'll be trying to bring you as much as we can here at Thoroughfan throughout the week with Breeders' Cup. But until that time, I am Doc with Thoroughfan, and as always, if you have any questions about anything we may have presented here, certainly feel free to give us a question or drop a line right there in the comments section. We will try to address it and answer it as quickly as we can. And, just hope everybody has a really wonderful week here, Breeders' Cup week in Lexington. Can't wait to get out and enjoy it. Hope everybody really does enjoy the Breeders' Cup. May they all have really safe trips. And we'll be back, of course, as always, with more wonderful information for the fans as the year goes on and the year comes to a close. So, As I always say at the end of these things, enjoy everything, and if you are looking for the most accurate, honest, and up-to-date information about this great sport of thoroughbred racing made for the fans, by the fans, there's only one place you need to turn, and that is right here at ThoroughFan.